Why do you keep doing this to me? Today we're gonna have a look at all of these mouse pads. If you've been at all interested in any of them and you wonder what they're like, what they compare to, if they're even worth buying, you need to keep watching this video. And before we do that, I want to mention that all of these mouse pads were actually sent out to me for free, and as you already know, that will affect my opinion drastically, and I will be shilling all of these products. The first mouse pad that we will be having a look at will be the InfinityMice Ruin. Some of you might be wondering, how the hell can you review this already? You've only had it for like a day or two. That is because this is quite literally just an InfinityMice Speed V2 with a soft over-ear mid bass and a die-sub printed design on it. The InfinityMice Speed V2 is actually one of my favorite pads of all time, and if you want to know more about this pad, check out the video that I've made up here since I have already reviewed it. But for those of you who are too impatient, a quick summary of this pad is that it is pretty fast. However, this die-sub design is slightly slower than the InfinityMice Speed V2 without the design on it. When doing a direct comparison, I feel like there's almost no friction when going from side to side here on the original Speed V2, and on the die-sub design it feels like I have slightly more control on it. It is a very minimal change, and I don't think that it is something that will drastically affect your performance in game. However, the difference is there, although it's only like 1% in overall speed. The InfinityMice pads use a polyurethane base. They have this insanely sick embossed design on the backside of the PU base. The pad is 4mm thick, and the stitching I would say is about level to surface. The stitching has never annoyed me in game, and I do also want to mention that this pad is available in a square size and also this 490 by 420. It is also double box, shipped flat, all of that stuff. This pad was actually more expensive than the other InfinityMice pads. It is still up for pre-order and it will be delivered within the next few weeks. And the price on this pad is $49.99. If you're not too happy with the pricing on this pad, I would definitely just go get the regular InfinityMice Speed V2, which I already said is ever so slightly faster. And this one is available at $35 for the normal XL size, which is 490 by 420, or at 40 USD for that square size. It also comes in a bunch of colors, and the next one upcoming is the Ocean Blue, which looks freaking awesome. So if you're at all interested in an affordable enthusiast grade mouse pad, which is actually one of my favorite pads of all time, definitely go check it out. I do think that it is still one of the most underrated pads of all time, and it simply doesn't get talked about enough. Next up in our stack of horror is the Dash 2 Max from FNATIC. This is FNATIC's first real proper enthusiast grade mouse pad, since it spots an authentic Rogers Poron base that is 6mm thick, and yes, you heard me correctly, 6mm. And you know what's even more crazy? This thing comes rolled up. When I talk to my product developer friends who do mouse pads, they were absolutely laughing their ass off when they heard that. But for me personally, I don't see an issue with that. The pad lied flat on my desk when I unboxed it, and I've never thought about it since then. I do have a tiny scratch here, but I blame Wampus for that because he couldn't deal with my unboxing knife. Other than that, the QC on this thing is freaking immaculate. The back of the base also has the silkscreen print on it, and it does look pretty sick. And considering that this thing is 6mm thick, it doesn't feel like an X soft. I would more call this like an artisan soft, but blown up to 6mm. And I also don't really think that it has that memory foam effect that you would expect from a pad being at 6mm. Of course, the stitching is going to be subsurface because this is a 6mm thick pancake. But here's the thing, no matter how good your stitching is, if you use the 490 by 420 size in the middle of your desk, you will absolutely feel the edge of this mouse pad because it's 6mm thick. I have just for fun tried to put my mouse pad up on my desk and simulated it being a 490 by 420, and the edge is absolutely annoying the shit out of me. So if I were you, definitely go for the square size, align it to the edge of your desk down here, and then just play with your arm on it. This is how normal Twitter aimers play these days. I have also converted to this style of aiming with square pads now, and I can definitely say it is very enjoyable. However, it's not something for everyone. Now, finally, to the surface itself. I would definitely consider this being a balance pad. I don't know why I expected it to feel that much faster, but it is not really fast. And in terms of the overall speed, it does remind me of the Hayate Atsu, but kind of a worn one. The texture is also very minimal on this FNATIC Dash 2 Max. You can feel some micro texture when you go over it. It's not 100% smooth like an InfinityMice Control V2, and there's much more texture on my Hayate Atsu here. But the overall gliding experience is pretty darn similar, with the Dash 2 Max being ever so slightly slower than this one. If you are currently on a control pad and you're lacking those micro adjustments because that drag is kind of holding you back, I think that this is a great alternative option. But if you do want a more control pad, they also have the Focus Max. Sadly, I couldn't review that one because for what whatever reason they didn't have enough units for us reviewers to actually get both pads. I do think that that is pretty annoying, especially for the viewer, because you're expecting me to compare those two surfaces to each other because this is a launch of two different models. But yeah, I can't provide that sadly. However, I am truly thankful for FNATIC and especially Iskaldi, my absolute goat, for sending this one out. I'm very happy to see you guys getting more into our enthusiast scene and also making a really solid pad that is viable for everyone, from a absolute Twitter tryhard to a pro player on stage. I think you did a great job. I personally don't see a real benefit of the 6mm base except for like compensating a wavy desk or something like that so that your surface is as consistent as possible no matter on what desk you play during tournaments. But all of that does sound a bit too good to be true, and that is because it actually is. This pad costs a whopping 65 euros here in Europe for the XL size and 60 euros for the normal 480 by 400 size. Yikes. That is really all I have to say. These pads are a tiny bit more affordable in the US, where they are $60 and $55 respectively, but still I personally can't really recommend them at that price point, since that is still more expensive than what it would be to import an artisan pad directly from Japan, for most people out there. Now, a more controversial pad is the WALLHACK SY001, and that is because almost everybody I've seen reviewing or talk about this pad have absolutely shat on it. At first I really hated the surface as well. It almost felt like a very abused and rough and also overwashed Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn. But after talking to some other members in the community, especially Juicer Cutie from AImerz, there's one thing that I realized is absolutely amazing about this pad. Where I am located here in Switzerland, it does get pretty darn hot here during spring and also summer especially. And when I'm grinding Kovacs for those PBs, my hands get very warm and also slightly moist. I don't really sweat that much, but when my hands are that warm when playing games and trying to hit my PBs, there are a lot of cloth pads. Yes, cloth pads that my skin kind of stick to. I have so much more friction when playing with my type of grip, which is an aggressive claw grip where I have these 3 contact points with my fingers on the pad touching, and that sticky feeling with my fingers I had never had on this pad. And I think that this might be one of the reasons why, especially over in Japan, this one is way more popular than the Mo. It seems that this pad is just goated against humidity, I guess. So if you're looking for a control pad that deals with humidity insanely well, this could definitely be for you. Both of these come with an authentic Rogers Spartan base as well. The base itself is pretty firm. I wouldn't call this an artisan soft, but also not a mid. I'd say that it sits right between those two. The stitching is about level to surface. It's kind of subsurface on some points of the pad. And similar to the FNATIC, it has this pattern on the back. This is a type of screen printing that I can see wearing off onto your desk over time. And I'm saying that because I know people in the industry who have tested this same process and also had it on their desk, especially a white one that was glossy for over a month and it did wear off onto their desk. I have not seen anybody have this issue with the pad yet, so I'm assuming that it's mostly safe, but I'm just saying it because it could be an issue. Now to the actual interesting aspect, the surfaces of these two pads. WALLHACK was getting a lot of backlash because everybody in the community was calling these pads straight out clones. People were saying that the Mo was a Heian clone and the Sai was a Saturn clone, and in reality that is sort of true. Whilst the PK knit fabric is almost identical under a microscope to the Saturn, it does definitely feel slightly different. The Sai has like this kind of more rough feel. It almost feels like it was heat treated. The Saturn Pro feels very, very smooth. It is on the upper end of control pads, so it's not like a mud pad or anything like that. Just your average, very smooth, almost boring control pad that is just very vanilla and a super standard that everybody can get used to. And when going over to the side, it just feels like ever so slightly more rough and kind of weird. And of course, these are very similar in speed, and I can't really feel a big difference between these two in game, I'm not gonna lie. If somebody was holding a gun to my head and I had to say which one is faster, I'd probably say the Saturn Pro, but these are very similar. Now when it comes to the Mo, it seems to be a clear favorite of these two. This is a textured balance pad. Even though they call it a speed pad, I would still call this a balance pad for sure. It is not as textured as my Artisan Heian that I have here. This one definitely almost feels like sandpaper, especially when comparing to the Mo here. When comparing these two pads in terms of speed side by side here, I would definitely say that my Heian feels a tiny bit faster, but yet again, these pads are very similar. So if you're looking for an almost better Heian, or you simply want a balanced texture pad that is a bit more safe and not as abrasive, I can definitely recommend this pad. However, just keep in mind that I wouldn't call this a real speed pad. I would definitely call this a balanced pad, especially when you're comparing it to something like the InfinityMice Speed V2, where I feel like I have much less friction. And now for a pad pad that I feel like I've talked about a billion times over on Twitter and especially my Twitch stream. And for those of you who didn't know, yes, I do actually stream over on Twitch, especially when I do unboxings and talk to chat the entire time, which is over on twitch.tv/jakeu_fps. But yeah, this is the Saturn from Lethal Gaming Gear. This is not the Pro version, but the new basic version, which is replacing their old synthetic rubber based version. It is the same exact surface as the Saturn Pro. I have reached out to them to actually have that confirmed. And what makes this pad kind of special is that it spots a Japanese rubber foam base. The base that this feels the most similar to is actually the Saoi GSR SE base and also the Vaxi PA base. They look very similar from beneath, but they do definitely feel a tiny bit different in game. This Saturn actually feels pretty firm, but also do remember that this pad is very thin. My unit sits at around 3.35 or 3.4 millimeters, which is definitely thinner than most pads out there. And because of this rubber foam base and the pad being very light and thin, it does feel pretty flimsy and cheap. Whenever I have people visiting and I hand it over to them in their hands, they were like, what the fuck is this? But the benefits of that is that it actually comes rolled up, which is much more affordable in shipping and also contributes to the price being pretty down low on this pad. This one comes in at around $30, which makes it very viable at their price point. The Japanese rubber foam base feels pretty firm even though the pad is so thin. It is a very consistent experience, but here's the thing. This pad feels noticeably faster than my Saturn Pro because of this very firm base. When I compared the two for the first time, I instantly noticed the difference. When using my Saturn Pro, it just barely feels like a control pad, especially when comparing it to slower pads that are out here these days. And when swapping over to my normal Saturn, it definitely does feel a bit faster and it almost makes it feel like a balance pad. The overall gliding experience definitely has some more friction to it over on the Saturn Pro, whilst on the normal Saturn, it hovers a tiny bit more for sure. So yet again, not the biggest difference in the entire world, but do keep that in mind. If that you're looking for a real control pad, this is probably not for you, but if you don't mind this slight addition of speed, this is definitely for you. And I would consider this being one of the best pads in their price class next to all of the InfinityMice pads. And that is already all the pads that I wanted to look at in this video. I have 2 more mousepad videos that I'm actually filming today already. So if there are any pads I missed out on in this video, please wait for my next 2 upcoming videos. But other than that, that's about it for this video. If you're at all enjoying this content, please make sure to like, subscribe, and also hit the bell right next to it so that you get notified for all of my upcoming reviews. And if you are a peripherals enthusiast, definitely make sure to check out our Discord server called Pericord. There's a link up on screen here. You can simply type in pericord.com to get over there. It is a big community with only enthusiasts inside of it. We have channels for all the different types of peripheral enthusiast hobbies inside of our space, which go from audio to mice to mousepads to keyboards to photography, all of that stuff. You'll also find me and Stubby in the voice chat almost daily talking to you guys. And we also do have a dedicated channel where you can post your own reviews and share them with the community. Other than that, that's about it for this video. Peace out.